At the beginning of Operation Epic Fury on February 28, 2026, US F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs entered Iranian airspace completely undetected. These advanced stealth fighters quickly took out Iran's radar systems, air defenses, and key military targets across the country. With Iran's defenses knocked out, US strikes hammered airfields, command centers, missile sites, and anything else worth hitting. Over the next few days, Iran's prized F-14 Tomcats, their best jets, were blown to pieces on the ground, including at sites like Isfahan, made vulnerable by the US, then neutralized by Israel on the 8th of March. America's technological superiority ensured these aging 1970s jets never left the tarmac. US air power established total dominance, proving legacy hardware obsolete in modern conflict. The quick elimination of the systems of Iran and how the F-35 and F-32 wiped the floor with Iran's best jets before they could even take off exposed just how far behind Iran is and how their plan for resistance to American military force was never going to work. The F-14 has become famous for its sleek design and variable sweep wings for mid-flight adjustment. The originals had twin Pratt & Whitney TF-30 engines, which could push them to speeds over Mach 2.3. But those TF-30 engines were the same unreliable power plants that plagued the early US Navy Tomcats with frequent compressor stalls, flameouts, and high accident rates. Iran never received the later upgrades to the far more powerful and dependable General Electric F-110 engines that American pilots eventually flew. Their Tomcats were still saddled with the old, troublesome TF-30s. The onboard F-14 AWG-9 radar could track up to 24 targets and guide 6 Phoenix missiles at once, making it the first fighter to engage multiple enemies beyond visual range. It entered US Navy service in 1974 and saw action from the Gulf of Sidra to Desert Storm. The Navy finally retired it in 2006, making it now over 20 years behind the newest in combat aviation. For Iran, the F-14 has become the backbone of their air force and the main part of their air defense. In the 1970s, before the Islamic Revolution, Iran had ordered 80 F-14s from the United States, but only 79 were delivered before the revolution hit. When the Islamic Revolution hit in 1979, ties with America were severed, leaving Iran to maintain this fleet on its own through reverse engineering, black market sourcing for parts, often relying on China, and attempting domestic innovations, which kept the planes alive, but little else. Today, estimates suggest Iran was keeping between 20 and 30 military aircraft operational. The pre-strike consensus among aviation analysts, Flight Global, the aviationist, from 2018 to 2025 data, was 24 fully combat-ready airframes, plus up to 30 airframes, including partial readiness. Even at 30, that was still only an eighth or so used by the US in Epic Fury, which again is still only a tiny fraction of what exists. The United States maintains the world's largest and most advanced military aviation force, with a total inventory of around 13,000 to 14,000 aircraft across all service branches. That includes over 5,000 in the Air Force, roughly 3,700 in the Navy, and thousands more in the Army and the Marine Corps. Iranian pilots, trained in old-school dogfighting, have logged thousands of hours in these machines, using them effectively during the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, where Tomcats claimed over 160 aerial victories against Iraqi MiGs and Mirages. The F-14s have been stationed at key bases like Bushehr and Shiraz for years, ready to swarm intruders with their agility, firepower, and the intimidation factor of a jet that once ruled the waves for the US Navy. Without them, Iran's Air Force relies on a flying museum of Soviet-era MiG-29s, Chinese J-7s, and domestically built Shakeh fighters based on 1960s Northrop F-5 designs, none of which match the Tomcat's range, payload, or radar capabilities. In essence, the F-14 is Iran's Air Force crown jewel, and all thanks to stealing them from the former pro-American regime of the Shah. Yet, in the high-stakes arena of modern warfare, even a legendary jet proved utterly outmatched against next-gen tech from the United States. The US took out nearly all major systems so fast that follow-up strikes from Israel and the US were able to take out several pieces of Iran's forces at a time, non-stop, day after day, rapidly weakening Iran and sending the message that we cannot and will not allow a violent terrorist group to turn a nation into their base of operations for threatening the world. Against the United States' cutting-edge fighters like the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II, the F-14 might as well have been a World War I biplane. Its analog systems and 1970s design no match for the stealth, sensor fusion, and network-centric warfare that define fifth-generation American air power. That's if they had even got off the ground. America's newest planes are virtually invisible to Iran's aircraft and ground sensors. The shock hit almost as soon as US guns and missiles, as Iran's beloved Tomcats, and ironically products of America, were shredded before Iran could even understand what was happening, proving that what basically amounts to ancient hardware, no matter how famous, will always lose against the precision and invisibility of next-gen American technology. Iranian military aircraft remained grounded throughout the operation. US F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs had suppressed Iranian radar and air defense systems from the outset, preventing any launch capability. Precision strikes then hit the airfields and facilities directly. With a series of strikes from Israel and the US, F-14s were destroyed while parked in hangars and compounds. The whole event, and Iran having no clue it was coming, shows just how far behind Iran's military really is. Modern air warfare does not involve close-range engagements or visual-range combat. Battles are decided at standoff distances with stealth and precision strikes. Iran's F-14s, for all their history, were reduced to smoldering wreckage on the ground because Iran couldn't see, detect, or respond in any meaningful way to the incoming threat. The F-14 Tomcat, for all its storied history, is still just a product of 1970s analog technology. Its radar, the AWG-9 system, was revolutionary in its day, capable of tracking multiple targets and guiding those long-range Phoenix missiles. But against stealth aircraft like the F-22 and F-35, it might as well have been a pair of binoculars. Today's stealth technology reduces an aircraft's radar cross-section to something smaller than your average bird, or even to nothing at all, scattering radar waves and rendering it virtually invisible to the older systems used by Iran, and would even be just as invisible to most newer systems. US pilots in their F-35s and F-22s had a god's eye view of the battlefield, with the world's best in everything from planes to drones to missiles, and the best intelligence on the enemy one could have. The fifth-generation fighters are equipped with active electronically scanned array radars, like the AN/APG-81 on the F-35, which can track targets from dozens of miles away with pinpoint accuracy, integrated with data links from AWACS planes, satellites, and even ground stations. American pilots saw the Iranian bases in real time, their positions plotted on digital displays as clear as day, while the Iranians went on as normal, still completely unaware that their entire military was about to be all but wiped off the map. The F-35 integrates sensor data from infrared cameras, electronic warfare suites, and distributed aperture systems to provide 360 degrees situational awareness. Iranian aircraft, even had they been in the air and ready for a fight, would have had no chance to react as the strikes began. Precision-guided munitions from US platforms slammed into the facilities. Fireballs erupted across targeted airfields. Wings and fuselages were torn apart where the jets sat parked, reducing Iran's F-14 fleet to wreckage in minutes. Eyewitness accounts and satellite imagery confirmed the destruction, with debris fields and craters marking the spots where Iran's best fighters once stood. The Tomcats, once the envy of other countries, were reduced to smoldering wrecks on the ground because they could not compete in the modern battle space. Military analysts from the U.S. Naval Institute have long pointed out the vulnerabilities of legacy fighters against stealth platforms. In 2026, modern warfare prioritizes what's referred to as first look, first kill capability from beyond visual range, and America's next-gen tech dominates that space. Iran lacked the ability to scramble effectively as the bulk of the prized F-14s have already been lost, while the United States had more than 200 modern aircraft actively conducting operations in the theater, and plenty more in reserve should the need arise. Iran was left with virtually none. Carrier strike groups like the USS Abraham Lincoln and USS Gerald R. Ford, positioned in the Arabian Sea, launched wave after wave of F-18 Super Hornets and F-35Cs, each capable of carrying multiple AMRAAMs and joint direct attack munitions for ground strikes. From land bases in Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, squadrons of F-15 Eagles and F-16 Vipers provided additional muscle, their pilots trained in seamless integration with stealth assets. The U.S. Air Force and Navy operate under a joint, all-domain command and control network, where every asset shares data in real time across the branches. An F-35 can detect a target, relay it to an F-22 for engagement, or even cue a Tomahawk missile from a distant destroyer. Iran's Air Force has spent decades hampered by sanctions that prevent access to modern avionics and parts, and so they've relied on fragmented communications and outdated tactics, which entered service in the 2010s and represents the best of American engineering. Built by Lockheed Martin, a longtime contractor for the US government, it boasts a helmet-mounted display that projects targeting data directly onto the pilot's visor, allowing for off-bore sight shots. Its sensor fusion turns raw data into actionable intelligence, predicting threats before they even materialize. The fallout from this aerial mismatch cascaded into more advantages for US forces. With Iran's fighters neutralized on the ground, US bombers had free rein to target naval bases, missile silos, and command bunkers. Satellite photos show craters where Iranian runways once stood, and CENTCOM briefings confirm the destruction of key radar sites. The US has suffered 7 service members killed in action, primarily from Iranian retaliatory drone and missile strikes on regional bases in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia on March 1st. These include 6 soldiers lost in a drone attack on Port Shuaiba, Kuwait, and a 7th who succumbed to wounds from a Saudi Arabia strike. Around 20 US personnel were also seriously wounded. On the Iranian side, reporting includes thousands of IRGC and military personnel killed across thousands of strikes, including top leadership like Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in the opening hours. No precise number of Iranian casualties is out yet, but Iran military sources keep claiming far fewer losses in an effort to cover up their humiliating failure, while simultaneously accusing US and Israeli strikes of civilian hits. Claims proven wrong, as countless videos come out of celebrating Iranians watching the fall of the extremist regime. This air dominance allowed other operations to proceed unhindered, with special forces inserting to secure objectives and drones providing persistent surveillance. For Iran's regime, already reeling from the loss of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in earlier strikes, this was a death blow to morale. State media has tried to spin tales of heroic Iranian intercepts, but leaked footage from US drones has shown the truth, that the Tomcats were destroyed in place without firing a single shot, and pilots unaware they were even being stalked by the apex predators that are the US fighter pilots. America's air dominance reassures its allies. Saudi Arabia and the UAE see the value in working with the US against extremist Islamist regimes like Iran. Russia and China, Iran's backers, have now witnessed the might of US air power. For the Iranian people oppressed under the regime, this adds to the people's hope for change as protests and rebellions flare up amid the chaos. As Operation Epic Fury presses on, the skies over Iran remain in the protection of American hands. The F-14's demise is a reminder that in warfare, innovation often wins. To stay updated on these developments, subscribe and turn on notifications. Be on the lookout for our next video on tactics, tech, and the triumphs of American military might.